Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I wanted to do a special podcast on what do the Pinoy metabolism testing reports look like? What do they give? What data do they give you? And how I look at it a little differently because I like to actually learn about you. What have you been doing? What are your goals? What are your struggles? And then we identify your areas of opportunity in the test. So we're not guessing and correlating all the data together. So we're identifying in a metabolism test, what are you good at? What's working well? And then what's not working well? All of our systems need to be functioning at optimal levels so we can thrive as we age. And I love the term creating metabolic harmony, that all the working parts and players need to work together to create the best, most efficient system. So, with that, let's dive into these slides. And this is review if you've been following any of the other videos or coming to my seminars. And I will ideally want to do a monthly seminar live in Solana Beach, North San Diego. And I always think of Wednesdays as Wellness Wednesdays. So I'm thinking of first Wednesday of each month, do a live seminar. So talking about what are we measuring when we're wearing a mask in the Pinoy metabolism test or any metabolism test, it's an indirect calorimetry, analyzing the VO2 is an oxygen that you're breathing in, VO2. And when you exhale, it's a carbon dioxide production, VCO2, so volume of carbon dioxide. From this breath analysis and the heart rate chest strap you are wearing during the resting test and the exercise test, we can collect a lot of data and put it in different calculations to get information as how many calories are you burning? What percentage of fat versus carbohydrates are you using for fuel? How efficient are you breathing? How often are you breathing? So there's a lot of data we'll look at. Is your nervous system in balance? So looking at your sympathetic nervous system versus your parasympathetic nervous system. Now, I've got big eucalyptus trees around my glass house here, and you can't hear, but the crows are all over and drive me nuts. It's crow hour in the morning and around 4 o'clock. Anyways, let me focus. Measuring active metabolism. So when we are doing an active metabolism test, I am increasing the speed or resistance, the watts, every minute to 2 minutes or up to even 5 minutes if we're doing a metabolic efficiency test. So it depends on the protocol I am doing, and how much do I increase that depends on your current fitness level. So I do a little check beforehand. On the exercise report, we will get lots of data, and Pinoy creates a wonderful, huge report, which doesn't probably make sense to you. It's a lot of data, but really I'm looking at what I see based on what your intake forms are looking at and nutritional therapy forms I use, and then looking for the data on the report to identify what do we need to focus on with exercise, nutrition, lifestyle habits, and supplementation. Ideally, we do some other labs and blood chemistry lab at least to put this all together. So this is the right side here. You can see fat max, your VT1, VT2, and VO2 peak, and heart rate max. So what does this even mean? Well, let's move my little picture. As I've been doing in other videos, there's different terms. And if you are curious as myself, I like to understand what it means, mechanism of action, why do I need to know it, how does it work, and understand what I'm talking about. So mitochondria create energy. The energy currency we use in our bodies called ATP. Mitochondria capacity is the number of mitochondria to produce ATP. Remember? Well, you might not know. I just did this in another video, but mitochondria are all over your body, millions, and not in a red blood cell. Mitochondria density are the number of mitochondria in a cell. So the more mitochondria that are healthy, functioning mitochondria we can fit, get it in each cell, the more dense it is, I'm finding makes sense to be a healthier version of herself in the future. The healthier mitochondria are. And we'll talk about mitochondria biogenesis here, the process of creating new mitochondria formed in the cell, and then getting rid of the dysfunctional mitochondria is cell autophagy, or specifically for mitochondria is mitophagy. So we also look at mitochondria efficiency. How efficiently are the mitochondria converting substrates into ATP? Now, I did a video you must watch if you're interested in mitochondria function with Dr. Patel, who's locally here at UCSD, and their new test, which I strongly encourage everyone to do, especially if you're doing my metabolism test, is called Me Screen, and you get $100 off, $100 off the test if you use my code Coach Debbie Potts. It is testing your mitochondria. So be sure to listen to that YouTube video with Dr. Patel, because the information we can gain from that blood test that you can do at your own house is 4 drops of blood, which took me forever because my fingers are really cold in the morning when I did my Me Screen test, and I should get results in a couple weeks. Metabolic efficiency, what does that mean? This will be on your report. And metabolic flexibility. So Kanoe test measures how well your body uses oxygen and how well you burn fat as compared to carbohydrates. A metabolically efficient person will burn fat much better at rest. So a resting metabolic test, we're going to see how efficient are you burning fat at rest, as well as during the exercise test at the lower intensities, how efficient are you using fat for fuel? And we identify this in the test report. You'll see your peak fat max. And this is what's big in the social media now, with Brad Kearns talking about all the time and Peter Tia talking about zone 2. Peak fat max is the top of zone 1. We use 5 zones, 5 heart rate zones. Bottom of zone 2, it's your peak fat max. Now, we also look at metabolic flexibility. Kanoe test tracks your body's ability to switch between fat and carb burning based on your activity level. The metabolically flexible person adapts quickly to using either fuel depending on the intensity need. So if I'm sprinting to an airplane to the gate, I am going hard as I can because I'm late. I'm going to be using carbohydrates, quick fuel, depending on how long I'm going. And I've discussed this in other videos. If I am walking slowly, I'm at the airport and I have 2 hours until my flight leaves, well, I'll be walking slowly and burning fat, ideally, as my main fuel source. If I have to suddenly sprint, I should be able to switch to using glucose and then come back to burning fat when I'm recovered. I can identify how well you do this in a Kanoe metabolism test because I bring your heart rate up. And then at the end of the test, I'm doing a 3-minute or longer test to see how long does it take you to switch back to burning fat after we reach VO2 peak. Okay, next slide. Where's my little slide ticker? So we see this information on the side. Whoops. Over here, you can see you'll get your biological versus chronological age on the test based on 3 different measurements, as well as where you are based on your age, height, weight, and gender. And then this chart based on your age, and get some data. Where are you now? And then ideally, I want you to retest every 3 months. Now, we also look at metabolic health, and I've done some blogs and videos on this, the metabolic health markers. This is referring to the optimal functioning of your metabolic processes in the body to create energy, to use energy, and how well you store energy. This is a clue when we do blood chemistry panel testing, looking at your blood sugar, your insulin, your lipid profile. Specifically to me, I think it's more important to look at triglycerides and your APOB and looking at LP little a gives us some clues, as well as your hormone regulation, looking at your thyroid, T3, free T3, your active form of thyroid. How is that? And an ideally Dutch hormone test to look at your cortisol rhythm. Now, good metabolic health is crucial for overall well-being, preventing chronic diseases, and improving your quality of life so you live a longer, healthier life. Lifespan. Now we look at tracking fat burn efficiency on the test. How do we do that? We're tracking through the resting metabolic rate is RMR. This gives us insights to your metabolic health and mitochondrial function. Again, I like to know more information about you, unique you, with my nutritional therapy intake forms, and ideally doing the package that I add in the blood chemistry panel. So go to Function Health and get a huge lab test, and then we can analyze that data within this, as well as ideally the me screen test is a great one to do as well, I said. So by addressing lifestyle factors and improving your capacity to burn fat as your main fuel while you're at rest during exercise and support better health and longevity, we want to look at your fat burn efficiency using a lumen. And again, you get a big $100, I think, off with my code on that one. But lumen is something you can test each day to look at how well am I burning fat or carbohydrates by blowing into the lumen, say 30 minutes before you eat a meal, or before you exercise, or after you exercise. So you learn about how your body is metabolically healthy and metabolic flexibility. What fuel source is a lumen will tell you a score 1 to 5, which is relating to what we talked about, the RER exchange ratio. Now, why is this important to discuss? Well, metabolic health, mitochondrial health, and fat burning efficiency, longevity, chronic disease prevention, it's all connected. So efficient fat burning is a hallmark of healthy, well-functioning mitochondria. And I just recorded a short video yesterday on mitochondria health and how we look at the role of the mitochondria as we age and what do we need to do differently to improve our mitochondria health with creating new ones and getting rid of the dysfunctional ones, as we said earlier. Longevity studies correlate mitochondrial health, metabolic flexibility, so burning fat, carbohydrates, being able to burn fat, and increased lifespans. Remember, the term is lifespan versus health span. And healthy weight metabolic function, improved fat oxidation, enhances metabolic health, reducing the risk of obesity, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes, which is why I like to do this metabolism testing and correlate the data with your metabolic health markers as we can find on a blood chemistry panel, as with Function Health. And chronic disease prevention, high fat burning efficiency may lower systemic inflammation. So looking at your CRP levels, looking at your insulin, and improve overall resiliency. And I'll just add in, my just brain went to with this last comment is also looking at your heart rate variability score and the balance of your nervous system. So making sure we are balanced between our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. If you are stuck in sympathetic nervous system with too much chronic stress, you are in overdrive, fight or flight all the time. So part of the reason I find chronic stress, elevated blood sugar, insulin resistance, there's a lot of other issues that can be part of this mitochondria health and metabolic health, is also looking at stress via the heart rate variability, which is a measurement of your vagal tone, which is a measurement of your vagus nerve, which is a measurement of your parasympathetic to sympathetic nervous system, as well as the vagus nerve connects your brain to your gut function. So listen to other videos on the vagus nerve to learn more. It's so fascinating. Now, what factors influence your ability to be efficient burning fat? Well, as I've been doing testing a long time, I did buy Pinoy testing equipment 3 years ago, but I did New Leaf metabolic testing cart starting back in 2005 and did that on and off and before the company got purchased by Lifetime Fitness in 2012, 2000, somewhere around there. So how you exercise impacts your mitochondria density, so you can improve it, how your sleep is, stress, nutrition, your sunlight exposure, there's all these different factors you can see. Now, on the right, you can see one of the pages from the report is called Fat Burning Efficiency Now and Mitochondria Function. It explains on each page what the markers are. It says what it does, and then why is it important. And then there's always 3 different exercise suggestions, nutrition, and lifestyle. Now, this is just a standard report. This is not customized. The only thing is up top showing where you rank. When I do my analysis and meet with you for a coaching session, it doesn't mean that you need to do all this. We need to personalize it. So that's when you just get a report without getting a coaching call and someone that's going to dive in deeper, as I do. It doesn't mean do all this. We have to figure out what's best for you by looking at the whole process. So mitochondria, again, why does it matter? On the report, again, we'll learn more, but you can read all this, how important it is for conditions as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cognitive diseases as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, obesity, and nutrient deficiencies. And again, inflammation, oxidative stress that are accumulating that beaker, increasing that beaker of stress. And this is just accelerating mitochondrial dysfunction. So really understanding what impacts our mitochondria and how they get to be dysfunctional and how to get new ones and get rid of the unfunctioning, that's not the right word, but dysfunctional ones. Signs and symptoms when your mitochondria are dysfunctional, you can see on this list, most common symptoms, fatigue, weakness. And this is why when I had my adrenal fatigue starting back in 2013, I was just struggling and looking for answers and no one could help me. And that's why I became the practitioner I am today, because no one was really helping me. They're giving me the right labs and just saying, here, come back in 3 months, do this on a piece of paper. And that didn't work for me. Taking all these supplements, that didn't work for me. Seeing traditional doctors, they'll just say, you're just depressed. Someone else just said, you're just getting older. I was 42 years old. It could be part of perimenopause because I was 42 and our hormones start to change. And I was doing a lot of exercise training for Ironmans at competitive level. And when you do Ironman Hawaii, you're qualifying for a race, the race in another race. So I was doing 2 Ironmans a year plus marathons and 50K trail runs. So I was doing an excessive amount of exercise that will increase my oxidative stress and lead to hot weather training, will lead to leaky gut. And so that's a big part of it. But also I was running my own fitness studio all by myself and trying to do everything and make it work. And my rent went up every January, 3%, 5%, that it was constant chaos for me and very stressful. And that was the combination on top of not eating enough. I was very strict fasting and low carb and not really matching my nutrition with my training now. And I was efficient fat burner, but because of everything combined is excessive stress that becomes nonstop, is chronic stress. Now, if you don't stop, pause, and reset, reboot your systems as your mitochondria, so speaking of being fit and healthy at a cellular level, we are lowering our production of energy. So we are going to be more fatigued when we're not creating as much ATP. So we're not feeling that recovery from workouts and bouncing back and having to take longer to repair the tissues. Oxidative stress, I've talked a lot about, diving into rabbit hole videos on increased oxidative stress. Dysfunctional mitochondria produce even more exhaust waste. So think of the reactive oxygen species is another word for oxidative stress, and this can damage the cellular parts of the cellular parts as DNA, proteins, and lipids. So the different parts in the cell get damaged because of this excessive stress, which is a exhaust. So part of creating ATP, we have some, that's normal. But when we have increased amount and less amount of antioxidant support, this happens as we age, as well as excessive cardio, endurance training, high volume exercise, high intensity exercise. This can all add to this dysfunctional mitochondria from too much reactive oxygen species, oxidative stress, and increased cellular repair. So it's not a good thing. So metabolism testing mitochondria function, we are looking at your VO2 max. This measures how efficiently mitochondria use oxygen to produce ATP. A lower VO2 may indicate impaired mitochondria function. A VO2 max assesses mitochondria capacity during high intensity exercise. Now, the respiratory exchange ratio, this is the oxygen in to the carbon dioxide out. And this goes into calculation, fat versus carbohydrates. So when your mitochondria are working efficiently, you are able to switch between fat and carbohydrates depending on your intensity of exercise. If your score, a low respiratory exchange ratio is at rest, say 0.7, you're burning primarily fat. You're efficient fat burner. If you have a high RER, say 1.0 or even 0.9, you're depending on carbohydrates. 0.85, the ratio between the two, oxygen and carbon dioxide, you're 50-50. So 0.85 and higher, you get more dependence on carbohydrates. So this can be a clue towards your mitochondria dysfunction. Now, metabolic efficiency is how well do you use energy from different fuel sources. And if you have mitochondria dysfunction, this often leads to lower metabolic efficiency and higher reliance on carbohydrates. Fat versus carbohydrate oxidation, we want to get the mitochondria functioning to burn fat, which has less exhaust fumes, less oxidative stress is created than carbohydrates. And where we are using that fuel at various intensities, we're looking at what heart rate are you burning the most fat and where we see that metabolic crossover point. So mitochondria function, again, refers to the performance of your mitochondria, which are the powerhouses, quote unquote, that everyone says, of the cell. So their roles include metabolic regulation, the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, calcium homeostasis, maintaining cellular calcium levels, energy production, generating ATP through oxidative phosphorylation. So we need oxygen, and it goes through the Krebs cycle and using ideally fatty acids to create more ATP. Now, apoptosis is a regulated program cell death. So we need that to happen. And then reactive oxygen species we're talking about. It's not a bad thing. We need it, but not too much. It's a Goldilocks effect for everything, including generating and detoxifying reactive oxygen species. They're byproducts of cellular metabolism. So it's going to happen, but it's when we have too much. Similar to liver detoxification, phase 1, 2, and 3, I relate to the washing machine, the rinse cycle, and the elimination. If we have too many baskets of laundry, say after a vacation trip, you come home, you have all this dirty laundry, phase 2 detox may get backed up. And so we have this same thing with reactive oxygen species, the electron transfer chain. We've got this backup. If we have too much of everything, we get overfull. I didn't say all that right, but you get the idea. Ooh, that's bad slide design. Metabolism testing mitochondria function. So lactate threshold. Now, lactate can be recycled and used as a fuel. I can do lactate testing, blood prick, during your test, but it's not really necessary because people do that when they're not able to do this test where we are able to measure your fat and carbohydrates. Lactate testing is when you don't have access to the metabolic testing cart. Again, we talk about the nervous system and the metabolic efficiency on your recovery, how well you start to use oxygen, and it comes back to baseline after exercise. So those are other benefits and clues that we're getting to create a personalized program from the data we collect in a metabolism test at rest and exercise. So potential treatment, again, there's just some samples of what you can do to improve mitochondrial health. And I've done a few other videos on this, but CoQ10, L-carnitine, B vitamins, magnesium. It's funny when I read this because this is pretty much why I started eating red meat in 2018 after reading and doing my own lab tests, how I was really low in B vitamins, carnitine, zinc, iron, which are all found in red meat. So eating quality, clean, grass-fed green meat, grass-fed red meat is really important to your mitochondria. And CoQ10 is a great part, is well needed part of the Krebs cycle, but we in mitochondria health, but we can get it through organ meat. And I don't eat organ meat, as I've said many times. I'll get the Paleo Valley caps, and CoQ10 is coming that way, as well as B vitamins. Magnesium, I prefer for myself, magnesium from Bio-Optimizers. It has all the 7 different types of magnesium in there. And L-carnitine get from meat, but also I'm taking Cynthia Thurlow's new Creatine Plus that has carnitine in it. So it's really important if you are vegan, vegetarian, that's fine, but you have to make sure you're supplementing what you're not getting, because these nutrients are all found in red meat. Now, exercise, moderate exercise has been shown to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis and improving energy production and overall function. So training at your peak fat max, as well as we'll talk in the other videos about creating new mitochondria with sprint interval training, which is 20 seconds hard and then 1 to 4 minute recovery. Maybe do that 5 to 10 times. We also want to reduce oxidative stress through antioxidants. Antioxidants include vitamin C, vitamin E, and really important, glutathione or precursors to glutathione, and help manage your inflammation with anti-inflammatory diet and or supplements. So really important part for us aging athletes that we need to add in more antioxidant in our diet. So reducing oxidative stress by having more antioxidants, keep that teeter-totter balance of oxidative stress balance with antioxidants. Now, targeted therapies, some cases we might need to boost mitochondrial function and repair mitochondrial DNA. I would look at Niagen and listen to my video with Mona from True Niagen. Niagen Plus IV is a new, faster, easier on your body to get the precursors to NAD. But that also is a good option. So on the reports, we're going to get all this data, RMR on the left and active metabolism test, all these markers, and find out what's holding you back from being your best self. You don't have to be an athlete. It's a breath analysis. So we're also getting all the data because you are breathing and we're measuring your breath. So we're getting all this information, as you can see on the slide. And then the resting test report, we get all this information, went over already, but metabolic age, your respiratory exchange ratio, how many calories you burned at rest, how efficient are you at burning fat? Are you faster, slower versus your age, sex, weight, height? Looking at the exercise metabolism test and comparing it to the resting metabolic rate, but the key metrics, oxygen efficiency, carbon dioxide production, the nervous system, I talked about the system. We want to look at the balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic. How much metabolic stress do you have, and how well is your nutrition? Do we need to adjust your macronutrients? Because if you're burning carbohydrates and not fat, well, we know we need to adjust what you're eating, as well as, of course, it's stress is an issue, and sleep and lifestyle adjustments. So really important. What do we get? RMR tests. We'll get this calorie chart on the far right. You can see the total calories, and then your RMR plus TDEE, the movement throughout the day. And then if you do exercise, how many calories you burn, estimate. And in the bottom, you can see the fat versus carbohydrates. So green is fat, blue carbohydrates. And then that gives us a lot of clues to correlate with your blood sugar, insulin, A1C. Looking at your metabolic flexibility, as we talked about the respiratory exchange ratio, the fat to carb burn. And we talked about switching that 0.7 to 1.0 carbs to fat and how that is important. So we get that clue from just a breath analysis. And looking at how well you are burning fat, metabolic efficiency, and then the active test. Looking at chronological versus biological age, checking out these different markers, VO2 max, metabolic rate, fat carb burn at rest and during exercise, and breathing mechanics. Exercise intensity, we're using different fuel sources as we increase intensity. So you can pause and read these screens if you want to learn more. Aerobic capacity or VO2 max and a higher VO2 is equal to a lower biological age with better cardiovascular fitness. How well do you use fat versus carbs again? This will also give you a younger biological age, better metabolic health. The better fuel switching you have a younger biological age, healthier metabolism. If you are more efficient at using oxygen, you have a younger biological age, higher VO2 peak. Cardiorespiratory function, well functioning system, younger biological age. So these metrics all help us look at where is your biological age versus chronological age, giving you insight to your future self. Now we can, again, a little deeper dive in how those are measured. You can look here. And then establishing your zones, 5 training zones. When we are doing an exercise test, I can also, if you don't need to do your VO2 max or VO2 peak, I can do a different protocol based on Bob Seebohor's metabolic efficiency point. Where is your metabolic crossover point test? That will be not as high. We will stop the test about RER 0.91, not go 1.1. And I'm also, when I do the test, I ask your perceived exertion on a scale 1 to 10, 1 being super easy, 10 being hard, your hardest you can go, what number you are. And I correlate that to write that down and what your heart rate is. But we can see based on the test, the carbs burned, fat, calories, breathing, matching breath frequency. And then from that, we're going to create these 5 training zones. So we're testing and not guessing your peak fat max, metabolic crossover point. Zone 3 is more tempo. Zone 4 is more your high intensity interval training. Zone 5 is more your sprint interval training. So we have benefits in each zones that you'll hear about the zone 2 versus zone 4, 5, and switching. And then the data over here on the right, this is the raw data report. Say the yellow here in the bottom is your fat, and then this person's burning carbohydrates. So they're not metabolically efficient. They have a low heart rate for where their peak fat burning is. So their crossover starts pretty early, and we can improve it. So fuel usage, if you don't know, when you're exercising, fat comes from triglycerides. Triglycerides are not bad. They break down into free fatty acids and we use that fat for fuel. So your RER would be 0.7 on the far right there. When we see your crossover point, your RER is 0.75 to 0.85. You're starting to increase your carbohydrate usage. That's going to be top of zone 2. And then zone 3 is more your tempo, where you're burning more carbs than fat, just a little bit of fat. That's more your tempo pace. And then your sprint interval training, predominantly now glucose, glycogen, X more lactate produced, and remember it can be recycled and used as fuel. And then zone 5, sprint interval training, we're using glucose, creatine, phosphate, and stored ATP for more of that explosive heavy lifting and sprint interval training. Your RQ value, RER, is 1.0. So respiratory exchange ratio, or RQ, is respiratory quotient, same thing. So your fuel switches. Now, if you look at your training zones, this depends what you need to work on. Primarily fat burning and some carbs here. You can see this fuel mixture and the breathing frequencies. And then we're looking at the test. What is your respiratory exchange ratio? And then collecting this data here on the right. So it's a good chart. How we're looking at your VO2, RER, breathing rate, all this information to establish what are your zones. So I say all the time, it's using science, not math. I'm not doing, hey, let's find your VO2 max, and I'm going to take that times 60% to 70% to 80%, 90%, figure out your zones that way. It's not how it's done. So we are actually looking at your breath frequency, your fuel source used via the RER, and your heart rate, and figure out what are your 5 zones. So we create a personalized training program from that and figure out what you need to work on. And then we create your nutrition and lifestyle habits if you're doing some additional coaching, and looking at if you're working on longevity, how you should train for longevity versus performance versus fat loss, how to improve your mitochondria with how you train. improving zone 2 for mitochondrial health. Again, it's not 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. It's looking at your peak fat max. And interval training, working at that zone 5, 10 to 30 seconds, 4 to 8 times with full recovery, 1 to 3 minutes is a great way to create biogenesis. So 2 ways, zone 2 training or sprint interval training. Those both will help, as well as some strength training. Most of us need more strength training because it's also, we talk about AMPK versus mTOR. And as we age, don't focus just the cardio. It's one part. So there's cardio, zone 2, there's interval training, and there's strength training. We need all 3, plus mobility, stability, balance, all that stuff. So we want to look at recovery, mitochondria boosting strategies, your sleep and your nutrition, heat, cold, looking at how to avoid metabolic slowdown. So we want to get the strength training, get the protein in, avoid your metabolism slowing down. So that's when we need to stop focusing on excessive cardio to change your body composition, but speeding up your metabolism with protein and lifting weights. So looking at creating metabolic harmony in your body, working on the whole you from the inside out, investigating what's actually going on from the inside out at a cellular level and connecting your breath, your lungs, your heart, your cells all together. So another time we'll go back and go into this rabbit hole of AMPK versus mTOR and how that's related to the testing and figure out what you should do as you age and the Goldilocks effect for everything. So let me know what questions you have and where we need to go to next. So thanks for listening, and I will follow up with more on mTOR versus AMPK because we need both.